So this is Morgan, and I'm here on the Naked Without Shame show. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the issue of abortion, which is obviously a very hot topic right now. But I think that Megan and I want to address this topic more talking about the inner logic behind it and sort of contrasting that logic with the logic that we have tried to explain in this show um, that John Paul II outlines regarding the human person.
Open your hearts, open up your hearts to Christ. Do not be afraid.
Hello, Megan.
Hey, Morgan. How's it going?
Good, good. How are you?
Good, good. I'm good. I'm
Where are
tuning in
you
again from afar.
tuning in? Yeah, from afar.
Yes. For
Yeah.
those who are watching, yes, I am not in the studio, but Morgan, you're looking good over there. You look like a news reporter, actually.
Thanks. Yeah, this is kind of a new setup for us, the desk. Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like
we're in a
it.
new studio too, which is kind of cool. So,
Yeah, super
yeah.
cool. I wish I was there, but this is awesome that we can still talk. And it sounds like we have an interesting topic we want to talk about today, especially in light of the fact that you are going to have a baby soon.
Yes. Yeah, so if you cannot see, I am very pregnant. I am going to be giving birth in about 8 weeks. We'll see, give or take. Um, so yeah, it's something that this has obviously had a huge influence on my thought and thinking this past year regarding John Paul II's theology of the body, because the child, the logic of the child and gift is like a huge part of his thought, and it's something I never had personal experience with until now.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think we wanted to talk about, we'll sort of use my experience to outline or shed light on this issue of abortion, basically, that's become very relevant because since the whole overturning of Roe v. Wade thing that's
Right.
happened. So
Hmm. Yeah, which has caused a lot of stir and a lot of just thought, people thinking and discussing, whether or not it should happen, those sorts of
right,
issues.
yeah, it seems like the
What does
issue of
this mean for
abortion
people?
is
Yeah.
yes,
What does
yeah,
this mean for
exactly,
the country? What does this mean for like individual states, like their
yeah,
legislation, the power that we have to make it legal or not? So in light of that, and then also the expansion of your own family and your own experience in pregnancy, yeah, I'm excited to kind of think about how the theology of the body can like illuminate us to understand the truth about the child, as you're saying,
yeah,
and about how we receive children, how we view children when we learn that we're going to expect a baby. um, what does that experience and the experience of the child have to do with love and gift?
right, yeah,
So
yeah, exactly, yeah.
yeah.
And I think we wanted to contrast that then with the logic that we're seeing in the culture, which kind of is like coming out of the woodwork. I mean, I feel like the issue of abortion has not been like a hot topic until this overturning of Roe v. Wade prospect was introduced. I feel like no one was really talking about it, at least in my, you know, circles
Mhm.
or experience. Um, but it seemed like for me, it's been really fascinating. Sad. I mean, definitely sad to kind of see like how powerful the pro-abortion sort of lobby is still. But then also to like understand the logic behind it, which might be a little different than it was in the beginning. Um, I think that now, so maybe in the beginning, the sort of pro-abortion logic was more like centered on um, maybe like the injustice of like a woman potentially dying because of childbirth and like they should be able to get abortion or like cases of rape or incest. And this was sort of the more like prominent logic that was used to justify abortion. And I guess what I've seen, which I'd be interested to hear what your take is, Megan. What I've seen is that logic doesn't seem to be as pronounced anymore or as typical. It seems to be the logic more is the burden basically that pregnancy inherently places on the woman and how that's something that is just inherently unjust almost if it's not explicitly chosen in every moment of pregnancy, right? Like that burden is too
Mm-hmm.
much to ask. um yeah,
Sure.
does that make sense?
Of somebody who isn't choosing it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would agree. I think the logic initially, as you're saying, seemed to like find a way to help the exception. Like the women who were in these exceptional situations where it seemed merciful to try to help them out of a bad situation.
Yes.
But I
Yeah, and
think
a
with like
truly
the
unjust situation, like a tragic situation even. Yeah.
right, yes. So like coming out of a place of like help and mercy, and I'm sure there are still like tinges of that even today in like the logic of people who support abortion. Um, but I think like the culture in general kind of lends towards, once again, like an autonomous type of anthropology, like so individual that I have the right to not be burdened by another person. And
Yes.
it can
Yes.
even happen, within our families, like feeling this burden of having children, the difficulties they cause. And then in this particular way, with pregnancy, if a woman, doesn't feel like this is going to be good for her, well, a burden must mean I can just push it off to the side. I can get rid of this in order to do what I want
Yeah.
with my life.
Yeah, yeah. Or my
Right.
autonomy trumps whatever the life inside of me is. I mean, the debate of like
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a person or not, I think is even like kind of fallen by the wayside. I feel like most of the time what's emphasized in the pro-abortion logic is really just this experience of a burden and how that's unjust. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, what I think
Yeah.
is just really fascinating about that is it highlights this logic that we learned, at the John Paul II Institute. We always talk about like our education there. One thing
Mm-hmm.
that we really learned that's characteristic of our modern society, our modern liberal society, as we call it, in this logic of liberalism, is this idea that like the individual and their power to choose is like the highest good. It's like everything, basically. And so you conceive of yourself as this sort of like isolated individual, separate from other people, separate from family, separate from your community, religion, all of these things. And that's sort of that's the essence of who you are, right? And
Mm-hmm.
anything that if
Mm-hmm.
you choosing to be in relationship needs to be first and foremost a choice, or else it's an injustice, or it's a almost a violence against the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of
Right.
like, again, I was saying like the liberal logic, and we're seeing that now in this, I think, in a very, very pronounced way in this abortion debate. That
Mm-hmm.
that is kind of like
Right.
what's being brought forth as the primary like argument for abortion, basically.
Sure. Right. And with this idea of like really being so autonomous that my freedom to do whatever I want trumps anything, makes me think of how, like, in a way it makes you your own God.
Yeah,
Like it's kind of like I'm choosing what is true for me. I'm choosing what is good for me. And of course, like, we do have free will, and that is a good thing. Um, but once again, like, this autonomy also keeps us from like considering relationship in our autonomy. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like we're not just ourselves, and the choices we make affect other people. And to
right.
include other people in our lives as an individual, like, I think makes us more free, and it's more true to a good and healthy community, a good and healthy lifestyle. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, so like based on this autonomy mindset, how I guess how would we then like contrast that to what we've learned from John Paul II? And he is like super strong about how like being in relationship and the demands of love actually like free us to being ourselves and
Yeah.
fully
Complete
alive.
us to actually
Yeah.
become ourselves. We
Right.
need
Right.
relationship. That's like
Right.
the John Paul II's
Hmm.
logic. That's obviously like very different than the one we were just saying in the
Exactly.
modern
So like,
liberal logic. Yeah.
yeah. So in your experience then, like with you being pregnant, why is it that you don't see your baby as a burden, or you're okay with the difficulties of pregnancy, or this baby kind of taking over your
your body.
body,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like
Just a
then,
creature inside of you and the
yeah,
person
right.
inside of you. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, what is your experience? Do you ever get tempted to think that your baby's a burden, or I don't
Yeah.
know?
I think that I would say I don't have personal experience of an unwanted pregnancy. I mean, my husband and I both deeply wanted our baby. But I definitely have experience of like have the experience of the sort of like uncanny realization when you're first pregnant, like there is a person inside of you that is kind of taking over your body. I mean, making you sick, kind of like eating away at your resources. I mean, like this is a very, at first especially a very strange experience. And for me, I think I always had the grace to see this as a beautiful thing and like a very wanted, very like something. So also, yeah, like what we're saying, like this thing that actually completed me. So it's like I didn't see it as opposed to myself and my own freedom and autonomy. I saw it as something that actually completed that. But that's, I had the grace to have that experience. Um, Also through like studying theology of the body for so many years and like being very formed in this way of thinking. But yeah, I would definitely like I want to affirm that it is a tension, right? Like the experience of pregnancy is like it is very, very, opposed and like opposite to the way of thinking that we are all formed in. I mean, even if we're Catholic, we live in this, we live in America, we live in this sort of like liberal world where this is like, we are like kind of, whether we like it or not, taught to think of ourselves as kind of like these autonomous individuals who are separate and from everyone else in their community. And we kind of, people can be like burdens on us, I mean, this is like a way of thinking that we are formed in. And so it is, it's still, the tension is still there, I guess. Um,
Mm.
yeah.
So how then would you say, like, our education in the theology of the body, our studies with it, um, give you a more maybe like true and natural experience then to what it means to be like gift, in your case, like mother? Like, what is it about those times of tension or those times of maybe difficulty that allow you to rest in, I don't know, the truth of like what you're saying, this completion
Yeah.
of your self gift, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I would say for me, sorry, my headphones are kind of wonky. Um, for me, I don't think it was so much that like I learned these teachings and then I was like, oh, okay, I believe this. Therefore, I will have this experience. It was more like, so it wasn't so like intellectual, I guess. It was more like what John Paul II was saying helped to uncover in me a desire and like experiences that I think were already there in some way. So, I mean, John Paul II talks about original experiences, how like the experience of Adam and Eve in the garden before the fall, of this perfect harmony, this perfect love, and just like this experience, this perfect experience of like the order of nature and given by God, like that is somehow in us. That's what he proposes, even though it's covered over because of sin in various ways. So I would say that like through hearing the teachings of John Paul II and reading and whatever, like being in community with people talking about it and just being in the church, I guess that that experience, the original experience became more, it kind of was uncovered in me, essentially, I would say.
Mhm.
Like, I would say it felt very natural to me, actually. I mean, and I think I also, like, this is also just, the story of my conversion, but like, I realized at a certain point that this sort of autonomous way of living, of like, okay, I'm just going to like live for myself, become successful, do what I want all the time, like that, be totally free. That was not making me happy. That was not actual freedom, really.
Mhm.
So I
Mm.
had already had that realization, years and years ago with my conversion. And it was something that obviously was deepening and deepening. And so I think that's what kind of prepped me to receive the gifts of this pregnancy in a different way than I probably would have, at 18 before my conversion, I'm sure. Very different. Um,
Mhm.
and to like face the issues that I faced of like being super nauseous all the time in the beginning And now like getting
Mhm.
super big and like it's hard for me to fit through things anymore. Like I just have this big belly. My clothes don't fit, all these things.
Like
Like to face
like
those as not as a burden, but as like as something that again is like helping me realize myself more, basically, to become more myself. And I feel that way. I feel actually more free. I feel more at peace through this
mm,
experience. But yeah, I think it was,
that's awesome.
yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So so it's like all these things that you had been experiencing before your pregnancy kind of opened you to just embrace almost like a way of being, right? Like a way of ac- accepting like relationship and accepting love in your life. And that way you could receive this child,
Yeah.
in a way that is natural and good. Um, and it sounds like too that like these demands that you're saying upon you that can feel or seem like burdens in a way, like I think John Paul II would also like promote that these are opportunities of love. These are
Yeah.
ways to like not see this as like a burden and like an oppression against my freedom and my body, but is it actually like an opportunity to receive someone and to care for them, even though like you're not necessarily even getting anything in return, even
Right.
though you're not fitting in your clothes or
Yeah.
through doors or whatever it is, or like you're just
Small corridors.
yeah, small corners, can't squeeze through people at church, like
Yeah.
it's really, I think, a beautiful way to start seeing others and even like the way that others treat us. I know we're talking particularly about like, the child and
Yeah.
the issue of pregnancy and abortion, but in general, like children do cause a lot of burdens upon us in a way. Like there's difficulties, there's stresses to raising children and
Yeah. Well,
to
they're completely
even just
dependent. That's the
yes,
thing
right.
about children is like they cannot take care of themselves. They need you to take care of them. And therefore, like they do place a demand on you just inherently in their very being. They can't just do their own
Right.
thing and be these sort of like in our culture we think that everyone just be autonomous, do your own thing and don't place any demands on me and we're good. Like that's how we should live in society. Like the child inherently challenges that,
Absolutely. Which
right?
is maybe why we're not seeing as many people having big families
Yeah.
too. I thought of that,
Yeah.
like maybe that could be linked to it.
Or just not
Um,
having children in general, that new
mhm.
sort of trend. I
Right.
see a lot. I
Yeah.
read Yahoo News a lot, a confession I'm making right now. I I don't know why I do it. It just makes me frustrated every time, but I think I somehow like that experience of frustration. It's I read it and it like helps me like be kind of in touch with like sort of the world, but it also like gives me
Right.
this yeah, it's bad. But
Feeling
anyway,
of
a lot of
angst.
times yeah, exactly. um but anyway, I read Yahoo News a lot, and a lot of times they will post articles about this exact thing, like people choosing not to have children, or people even saying like, "I wish I didn't have children." That was a recent one I saw that I thought was
Mm,
just like really very sad. Um,
mm.
but just basically saying that like this experience of like dependence that you have with the child, it's not worth it, and
Wow.
like it's not
It's
it's
not
not
worth it.
it's not part of your happiness. It can't contribute to your
Mm,
happiness. And maybe for some people it does, but for all these people, these articles are saying like it doesn't. And I
mm,
think it's just yeah, it's just interesting. It's sort of highlighting this trend in thought of like
yeah.
maybe you shouldn't have kids. Like maybe you should just like do your own thing your whole life and you'll
Hmm.
be happier.
Right. But I think people at some point recognize this like this lack or this loneliness, in
Yeah.
some way, somehow. Um, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you like are reading those recently, like those articles that they're coming up more. Like
Well,
why
yeah, and
we
I think
regret
especially in
having
light of the
children.
abortion issue, I think
Yeah,
they're more popular now.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So so yes, it's true that like there like you're saying there's a tension between like the demands of children, but then also like knowing that through those demands we can be a gift. Like I was saying, like opportunities for love right?
Mhm.
I just think it's so like amazing to embrace that hard, but like it's amazing that we can take like those opportunities where we're not getting anything, or we're feeling like we don't want to sacrifice for children or for others around us, and like push through the feeling of negativity and like actually just choose to love. I mean, that's like very Christ-like to do that, to just push through like, I want what I want when I want it, instead like choosing to like choose the good of the other, really.
Yeah.
Like whether or not I feel good about it or not.
Right.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
whether
Yeah.
or not I'm getting anything out of it. Um,
Yeah. Or you feel
because in
like in the
fact, I'm like
moment you're
giving
getting anything out of it.
everything,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like, especially for children, like I'm giving everything. I'm giving my body, I'm giving my money, I'm giving,
All of your resources. Yeah.
my time, right? But, with John Paul II being such a, advocate of the family, and seeing how like real family life, when lived well, can image this love of God and this peace and this life of grace, like seeing him like really, I don't know, like fight for the family. There must be something to that, like to live in that way of like total outpouring. There must
Yeah.
be something true to like my humanity to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But I guess I want now to maybe we can like shift to focusing on how do we, okay, if that experience is not natural to us, because I think in a lot of ways, like we're talking about all these like sort of this new kind of trend of like not wanting kids and thinking kids are just too much of a burden. I think that's present
Mhm.
in our culture, but I think there's also like enough too of like the more I would say natural experience of like people still want kids, people still want to have families. They don't just want to like do their own thing their whole lives. And like I mean, just to be fair, like I think there are still a lot of people that make that choice.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I guess
Absolutely. People are still
what
having children.
yeah, people are still having kids. So the world's not going to end. But
No.
hopefully. um but how are people making that, I guess I'm trying to say, what makes it worth it for people? I mean, even like outside of like John Paul II's, theology that we're trying to kind of explain, but like what in a kind of more concrete, tangible way, like what makes it worth it for people? Or what do you think? How do you think people continue to do it without just like saying throwing in the towel? Like, okay, this is just too much. Um,
Right. What comes to mind is actually a, a woman I know, a friend of mine, who had a son with her husband, and later on decided to have another child. And I think her and her husband were like okay with one, but they wanted to have another. And I think the logic that they gave is that, well, we don't want like our son to like be alone if we like move on or we pass away,
hmm,
right? Like it would be good for our son to have another family member to like live in community with and like take care of and like have in their lives.
yeah,
So I think there's like this sense of like that's good to like have family. I
yeah,
think no matter what, like it's good to have others in our lives. I think
yeah.
that never, like,
To not be
in a
alone.
way that never,
Yeah,
right, that never goes away. I think when COVID happened, like, and everything shut down, I
yeah,
feel like that also created this sense in people of like, oh my gosh, where's my family? Like in times of crisis, where are the people that I can take care of and are going to take care of me?
right.
You
Yeah,
know, so I think when like these times of, like I said, crisis, or just awarenesses of our solitude, like our
mhm,
aloneness, happen,
yeah,
like we realize, oh, it would be better to have others
yeah, yeah.
here.
I don't want to be alone. Even though
Right.
I might think I want to be alone all the time, I actually
Hmm.
fundamentally don't want to be alone, and it's a very
Right.
scary prospect to be alone.
Yeah, it is.
Um,
It is very
yeah, and
scary.
that tells us something. I mean, that's actually very very profound. It tells us
Hmm.
something about who we are as humans.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yet
I
we
think
get
that's a
tricked
big
into
part of it.
thinking that,
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
by like the kind of air of our culture, we get tricked into thinking like that I'm okay on my own. I don't
Right.
need other people.
Yeah. Yeah,
But I wonder
exactly.
if we really like didn't have other people, like if access to people was gone, would
Yeah.
we still would we still feel that way?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think
So
that's a huge part of it.
mhm,
Just this
mhm,
like this need for others, which family and like having children like definitely highlights. Um, yeah,
absolutely.
in a like very particular way.
Mhm,
Yeah. Um, I think too the other sort of thing that I was thinking about with like what makes it worth it for people to continue to have families, even though like in some ways like it is like a it causes you suffering. It asks a lot of you. Um, I think it's just like really like the experience of love. I mean, it's related to what you were saying of like this desire not to have another, and like love is obviously a huge component of that. But like, I just think of like, I mean, I think even my mom always told me this that like when you have children, like you experience a love that like you didn't know was possible, and there's something just like so like natural and almost like primal about that experience. Like you don't have to be, you don't have to be Catholic to have that experience. It's just something that's so inherent and true to our nature. Like that this child that's yours, like even though it's, crying all the time, making you not sleep, I'm trying to gear myself up for this phase in life in a couple weeks. Like, but somehow like and people keep telling me because I expressed that fear, like, oh my gosh, like how am I not gonna sleep? That's gonna be crazy. Like I love sleep more than like most things in life. How I function. And people always tell me like you just love your baby so much. Like you don't understand. And I already have that experience, like I was saying, with like being pregnant, but I think like when the baby's born, it'll be like, times a million, basically, like of you just want to be there for your child. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. I mean, I think that people do suffer. There's a real suffering. There's a real stretching of your person that happens in having children. And so I don't want to like just say like, oh, it's just all sunshine and roses. But I think that like the problem is this is, what I'm willing to say. I think the problem is people, like I was talking about before, like we have this tendency because of sin to like cover over our more original experience. And because of woundedness, I think a lot of times we're wounded. We have like sort of these relational wounds. And so we kind of like our more natural, original, again, experience of love is not as accessible to us, if that makes sense.
right.
But
Mhm,
it's like really a matter of like not covering over that experience of like just like this pure love that you feel for
mm,
this child. Um,
mm.
and like having I don't know,
Almost the openness, like the
the openness.
openness to
Yeah,
that love. Yeah, because
exactly.
what I'm thinking is, like the I think the ways and the reasons why we do cover up that that the kind of natural innate sense of love and the order of love, especially in the family, is because it it kind of makes us feel unsafe and like unprotected and vulnerable, you know,
Yeah,
to like always be open to love and to demands and to sacrifices,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Because it
But
maybe
the
has
more
wounded us
we
before. That openness has wounded us in the past.
exactly
So
right,
we question:
yeah,
is it worth it to continue to be open to it?
hmm
Yeah,
right, yeah.
yeah,
But I just like imagine Christ and like the ways that he was open to everyone and was willing to sacrifice, and like seeing his life and his model, I'm sure helps parents so much, like to get
yeah,
through, you know, the demands or difficulties of
yeah,
children,
yeah. To affirm
as
the
good as they
love
may be. Yeah.
over the sacrifice. To say that this
Hmm.
love is actually more primary
And more
and it's
true.
greater and more true,
Hmm.
exactly. Then, I mean, the
Hmm.
sacrifice actually just affirms that experience of
Hmm.
love, and it becomes a
Hmm.
part of that somehow. It doesn't become it's not just meaningless, the suffering. It actually is like for the
Hmm.
sake of this love,
Right.
for the sake of
And I
affirming it,
imagine
basically.
I imagine over time, the more you do that, I'm sure that there is a way that that love and sacrifice like transforms you in a
Yeah,
way.
I think it becomes easier. I see that with my
Yes.
own, with my mom. you know, she
Yeah.
always tells me like
Right.
when she had kids, like she was very like in this sort of like individualistic mentality of I want to do my own thing. And then she really
Mm-hmm.
has become one of the most sacrificial people I know. She's always thinking of her kids, you know. And I
Mm-hmm.
just think that yeah, it's just really beautiful, just in this very natural way. Like having the experience of having children like really transformed her
Yeah.
and made sacrifice a
Absolutely.
lot
That's
more. Like
great.
it's hard for me to comprehend how someone could be so sacrificial. I hope that, you know, having children and
Mm-hmm.
just whatever God does through my vocation like helps me to do that better. But
Absolutely. I think
yeah,
that, precisely the vocation itself, whether it's to marriage or to religious life, is like this education in love,
yeah,
right? So not only are you doing this with your spouse, but then children allow you the opportunities, once again, not the demands, but the opportunities to choose love. And that education in love just helps you flourish, helps you be more free.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so
So I
cool.
guess what would we, I don't know, what would we say to someone who like is very like kind of in the thick of this logic that we were talking about, this like autonomous logic and like is very pro
Mm-hmm.
abortion because of it? Like, how would we, because again, I don't want to be too like sunshine and roses, like, oh, like, well, just like give of yourself and like you're going to be whatever, everything's going to be fine.
It's going to
Like,
be great.
yeah, yeah. Like, how would you like start to maybe have that conversation with someone or start to address that? Um,
Right. It's good to bring it back to that. I think by starting off with what you just said, like, hey, this isn't like all sunshine and roses. Like, this is hard. But I think the question, once again, is like, why is it worth it? I think until you have an authentic experience of like love within that, I think within that context, it makes like much more sense. The context
Mhm.
of, well, any context really, but maybe in the context of like having a child or even just like encountering a child that like
Mhm.
kind of pierces you, like the simplicity and the goodness and the love of a child
Yeah,
that pierces you, or even just like having an experience of sacrificing, like a little sacrifice for someone, and like once again uncovering like the ways that our woundedness and our hard hearts have closed us off to that beauty.
yeah,
um
yeah.
that's what I would say, and that is hard to like teach even to ourselves.
Right.
It's hard to
Mhm.
teach us the truth. And this is why like the theology of the body is like a teaching on the human experience. Like we're talking about it, right? But we learn these things in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah,
So I guess I would add that to how do you bring it back and address that with somebody who is still, pro-abortion, or like uh, accepts like pro-abortion logic with seeing children as burden if you're not choosing the child. um, I would go there. What would you
yeah,
say?
yeah. I would agree with you. I think,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the highlighting the beauty and like encouraging, yeah, not I mean not just encouraging other people, encouraging like ourselves to like affirm to uncover sort of the wounds that like prevent us from being open to this experience of beauty, basically. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so somehow like facilitating that in
Right.
your relationship with the person, but also like I would say, I mean, the thing that immediately came to my mind is just like the question of like, what is your life for? Like asking yourself that question,
Yeah.
you know, because I think a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
like they don't ask themselves that question. They kind of like operate out of these this logic that like it's not really they don't examine it. It's just kind of like an assumption that they have.
Right.
Um, and I think a lot of times when people do that, they end up yeah, like missing out on like something that's going to actually be more natural and more fulfilling to them. Maybe harder,
Yes,
yes,
I agree.
and like less safe,
Mm-hmm.
like you were saying. You know, to open ourselves to relationship and the wounds that could come with that is not, you know, it is unsafe. It's very vulnerable. It's very hard.
Right.
But yeah, to kind of like encourage people to examine like, okay, when you live that way, when you live in this sort of like closed off way, and you sort of are not open to like experiences of sacrifice
Yeah.
in relationship. Like how are you happy? I don't know. Like, are you really
Hmm.
happy? Um,
Right.
because I would say for
I think.
myself, like if someone asked me that question before my conversion, I would like it would probably really provoke me. Be like, I don't think
Mm,
I am happy. But
yeah.
I don't know there's another way. You know, maybe they just don't know there's
Hmm.
another way or there's another way of thinking about this or yeah.
Hmm. Right. I think it's also, along with that, a matter of like values, and maybe like not only asking the question of like, what is your life for, but like, what do you authentically value?
Yeah.
And like, think about those values in light of just life, right? So, like, do I want to be a person who like does value like consideration of others and sacrifice and courage and like doing hard things? I think that's one value that has really struck me lately. It's like I want to value doing harder things,
Yeah.
because that leads to a more sacrificial life, and having the courage to do that.
Yeah, and it's more beautiful. It's
Um,
more beautiful when I do things that are hard,
yeah,
even though
yeah,
they're hard. Yeah.
right, yeah, yeah, exactly. I I've been reading a book um, called The 12 Rules of Life. Have you heard of this book?
Wait,
No.
by Jordan Peterson? No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I love Jordan Peterson. He's the best. I never
Okay,
read the
great.
book though.
Well, I'm listening to it on audiobook, and one of the rules is, I know this seems like a long shot, but it kind of ties in. One of the rules of life is to like always like compare yourself to who you were yesterday than who someone else is today. It makes
Hmm.
me think of like, look at yourself and like, what are the values you're living by, and can you like improve those day to day?
Hmm.
I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, can I look at yesterday and say like I carried through with like good values, or
Hmm.
like I thought about my life and I like lived for others? I don't know. Just kind of
Yeah.
came to my mind, but
Yeah. That is really cool.
yeah. But like the idea of like, yeah, examining your life, I guess,
Yeah.
and like really having these deeper questions of like, who am I for? What is my life for?
Hmm.
And what like values do I want to emulate like in the world?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And sort of challenging yourself. I think that's
mhm.
Jordan Peterson, like part of his genius is like, and why he's so popular is he encourages people, especially young people, to challenge themselves in a world that like that's not the logic. That's not the popular logic. It's like just do whatever you
Mhm.
want and just like don't do, don't challenge
Yeah.
yourself. Just like you're good. Like that
Yeah. Right.
Jordan Peterson like really seriously questions that, and I think people are really
Mhm.
attracted to it,
Mhm.
which is
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. So awesome. Well, is there anything else that comes to mind with this topic of um, just like the recent things on abortion that have been going on, and like what we've highlighted with the different logics? We didn't want this talk to be like condemning or even about like people who have abortions or who are pro-choice, but more like to really highlight the logic, and
Yeah.
once again like to challenge all of us to like reflect on our lives and say like, what is the child and having a child mean for my fulfillment in life? Like, what does
Yeah.
that mean for living self-gift in my life?
Right.
And how can I see those moments of burden actually as something to embrace beautifully, though it's full of sacrifice, but to see them one at a time as like an opportunity to choose love and to
Yeah.
choose self-gift,
Yeah. Even if it's
Um,
incredibly hard and the circumstances are wrong and all these different things. I mean, like the John Paul II would say, like, this is an opportunity to be courageous and to affirm like this incredible beauty that like will sanctify you, not only sanctify you, but make you happy, make you happier, make you more yourself, to embrace this thing, even if it wasn't chosen. That's the whole thing too. We didn't
yeah,
talk about that as much, but like this whole like idea that everything in your life has to be chosen or else it's bad. I mean, this is very like John Paul II really seriously challenges that. I mean, like I
right.
remember, I was
Yeah,
thinking
yeah.
of D.L. Schindler, one of our professors, a brilliant man. he always says like the two most important things in life were not chosen. And there's something really, really profound in that. And he uses this to question the sort of liberalism and the logic of liberalism. He says,
Right.
birth, being born, we didn't choose to be born. I mean, it's something that people don't really think about.
Yeah,
Literally didn't
that's
choose to be
true.
born.
And
And
that's very
baptism.
important.
Yes. And it's like the most
Um,
important thing.
yeah, right.
Yeah. And baptism, which I always say,
And
like, I did
baptism.
choose to be baptized. So it's kind of, but not really. God chose me. But anyway,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah. That's so
is
great.
the church's practice of infant baptism, this sort of is the more normal way of coming into the church, into the life of grace. Like, it's not something you choose. It's imposed
Right.
on you. And there's something that like he says, like, this is actually like an incredibly beautiful, incredibly profound thing. That our life is not about choice, it's actually about what's given to us. Even if, yeah, and like talking with the issue of abortion, like we're willing to say, like, even though it's a very difficult, controversial thing to say, like, even if that thing that's given to you is very difficult and causes a
Mm,
lot of suffering, like, still
yeah.
somehow, like, to not exit out of that, but to embrace it is like a more beautiful way, a more beautiful path. And like, we need to, like,
Hmm.
obviously there's all these different things we can talk about with that, of like supporting these people, giving these people resources that they need, and just walking with them and, taking on
Absolutely.
those burdens with them. It's also an essential part of it. Like, we can't do it alone. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great, Morgan. That's a really good summary.
thanks.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, we just wanted to
Yeah,
give our
I
two
like that
cents
point.
about this whole abortion topic, and not in the kind of like more political way. We don't typically do that. I want to talk more
Hmm.
about the deeper logic things,
Right.
as Jean
The
Paul Sartre did.
person, the
Yeah.
experience. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Morgan.
Yeah. Thanks, Megan. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. We really hope that you enjoyed it. We just wanted to let you know that you can support Awaken Catholic at theawakenapp.io. And you can also support specifically our show, The Naked Without Shame Show, at thenakedwithoutshameshow.com. And we would really appreciate it if you did.